It's the champ, Shannon the Cannon, two-time heavyweight champion of the world. And you're watching Sports Icons. Subscribe. Let's go, champ. Let's go, champ. Let's go, champ. Champ.
Right, so yesterday morning, I asked a question here on YouTube in my community section. And again, every time I do a response to any of the kind of polls that go on in my community section, I always get asked a question, where is it? I didn't see the notification, because a lot of people get notified, a lot of people don't. Maybe something to do with that bell icon. I have no idea, click it anyway. But if you don't know where it is, go to my homepage here on YouTube, just go across the tabs, you'll see like home, you'll see playlist and whatever. There you'll see community. In there, that's where I'll do some random polls once in a while. I'll post some fight news and some other random stuff that's just random, okay? It's what it is, that's what it's there for. Now, the question that I asked and the poll was, will this era of heavyweight boxing, heavyweight to be specific, okay, I know some people can't miss that point, but heavyweight boxing, will it be looked on in years to come as another golden era? As in this particular era with the likes of Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Dillian Whyte, Andy Ruiz Jr., Deontay Wilder, Alexander Usyk, and whoever else, okay? Will it be looked back on and appreciated more than what it is right now? Will it be seen as a golden era? Now, the results, 28% of you said yes, definitely. 9% of you said no, it's weak and just won't be remembered. And 63% of you said possibly if the top guys fight each other more. And I can agree with that poll. And to be honest with you, it's not really a result that has surprised me, because there are so many great fights that we still waiting to see. Of course, we're still waiting to see the undisputed fight between Joshua and Fury. Okay, so that will certainly add to this era being a potential golden era. There are plenty of other fights that we'd love to see. We'd love to see Anthony Joshua take on Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder take on Andy Ruiz Jr. Deontay Wilder take on Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte take on Andy Ruiz Jr. Dillian Whyte take on Tyson Fury. Alexander Usyk. And all these kind of guys can get in the mix. So there are still quite a lot of fights that we would love to see still. So it's like any era though. And if this era is going to be seen as a golden era and appreciated in years to come more than what it is right now, what's the turning point? Well, the turning point will have to be 2015. Wouldn't it? Anthony Joshua announced himself onto the world stage, didn't he? At this point, he was no longer a prospect and he's looking at the world title. He defeated Dillian Whyte. Then his very next fight become IBF World Heavyweight Champion. Of course, that was in the early part of 2016, of course. But he took on Dillian Whyte 2015. Deontay Wilder became WBC Heavyweight World Champion in January 2015 by defeating Bermane Stiverne. Tyson Fury went over to Dusseldorf, Germany, and dethroned a decade reigning heavyweight champion, unified champion in Vladimir Klitschko. All of this off the top of my head, by the way. So 2015 would certainly be seen as a pivotal turning point. So from 2015 up until the next 4 or 5 years will determine, is this an era that will be considered a golden era for heavyweight boxing? Now, I know people say about, Wilder, he's just taken on a whole bunch of stiffs and his title defenses were weak. Yeah, okay, they were. But he's still important as far as the potential for this being a golden era, because he's been a talking point. Yeah, sure, okay, he's taken over this trash cans and he talks absolute waffle and comes out with all kinds of excuses, but he's still important for this particular heavyweight era. He's still important for a lot of boxing fans, like him or don't like him, that there are fights that we still want to see him in, much like other fighters, okay? Now, when we look back on previous eras, okay, some people go as far back as to say Rocky Marciano kind of era. I mean, I don't know anybody who's around that would remember that. If you are, big up. But a lot of people will say that kind of era, and Sonny Liston, and then of course you're going into the Muhammad Ali era. Joe Frazier, George Foreman, these kind of guys. Then you kind of take a bit of a rest, obviously, from the 70s. Then you have to go through probably the late 80s when Mike Tyson, of course, where many people consider him to be in his prime, even though he hadn't even matured as a man at that point. He was still very, very young. But a lot of people may now consider the 90s as the golden era, the last golden era of heavyweight boxing. This is before the Vladimir Klitschko and Vitaly Klitschko reign, where a lot of people say throughout the 2000s and that heavyweight boxing just wasn't interesting because these guys were just dominating it. But again, that's because people say here in the UK and over stateside can't identify with these guys because they're not from our neck of the woods, are they? You didn't really see them do too many interviews, especially in English. You didn't really see them do trash talking and whatever else. You didn't really see any of that. So people will say that was a weak era. I don't think it was a weak era. I don't think that the Klitschko brothers were just that much better than everybody else, and it made it look like it was a weak era. But will that era be looked on as a golden era? Probably not. But the 1990s, certainly. A lot of people will look back on and say, yes, that was a golden era for heavyweight boxing. But again, don't get me wrong, I was very young at the time, so I wouldn't know too much about it. But a lot of people were saying that they didn't like that particular era back then as we were going through it. Of course, we're talking about Lennox Lewis. We're talking about Mike Tyson. We're talking about Evander Holyfield, Tommy Morrison, George Foreman doing a comeback. You've got Riddick Bowe and so many other fighters. And a lot of them were fighting each other. Probably the biggest fight that people didn't get to see, that people wanted to see, was Lennox Lewis and Riddick Bowe. Okay? But a lot of people didn't appreciate what was going on back then. But now people will look back on it with nostalgia. Will it be the same in this particular era? With the likes of Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Dillian Whyte, Alexander Povetkin, Alexander Usyk, Deontay Wilder, Andy Ruiz Jr., Luis Ortiz, and all these kind of guys. Now, to go back to the point of the result of this poll, where if more fighters fight each other, then yes, it's possible people will look back on this era with nostalgia. Us as older men and women look back and go, actually, we didn't really appreciate it at the time. Because today we are in an era unlike any other previous to any other kind of boxing era beforehand, where we had the internet. Everybody has a say and everybody has their say, and this is as important as anybody else. Everybody has the Wi-Fi, have the internet on their phone, on their computers, whatever it may be, and everybody who has an account on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, whatever it may be, is going to have a say, and they're going to have their opinion. Right or wrong, their opinion is their opinion, and as far as they're concerned, it's a valid opinion. So people are arguing all the time, and inevitably it creates trolls. Okay, now had we had the internet when, say, Lennox Lewis, Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield and that around in their prime, maybe it would have been exactly the same. Trolls would have been created then. So while we are in the internet era, it's just that we recognise the fanboys a whole lot more. Hey, I'm a fanboy too, okay? But we recognise the hatred of one fighter to another. Back then, we heard a little bit, but again, that was from, for example, like me. Obviously, I was in school back then. With a lot of people, it would have been down the pub or in work or wherever it may be. That was as far as it went. I mean, long gone are the days where people will stand there and actually have a physical conversation, right? It's almost to the point now where two friends will stand there and text each other even though they're in the same room, or drop a voicemail, whatever it may be. This is the era that we're in. It's created a lot of lazy people, that's for sure, but it's created a lot of people with a lot of opinions. I think people would have had the same opinions back in the heydays of when Muhammad Ali and that was around, and Lennox Lewis was around, and before then Rocky Marciano and Sonny Liston and whatever else. But I think today it's overshadowed by social media. But the point remains, and I do agree with the poll result, that as long as we get to see more of the fights that we have, because today as well, again, let's not forget, as long as I've known it really, boxers today are more businessmen than they are fighters. Back in the day, it seemed like everyone just wanted to fight each other. Behind the scenes, I'm sure there were businessmen too, okay? The boxers were considered themselves as businessmen. But too many fighters come through earning multi-millions of pounds and dollars and everything, but now they're sat there broke because they weren't businessmen. Whereas people of today's era will learn from the past mistakes. They will invest their money. They will buy property. They will do all that kind of thing. Or at least you would hope that they would. I mean, hopefully we don't see in years and years to come Deontay Wilder or Anthony Joshua or Tyson Fury or Dillian Whyte or Usyk, whoever it may be, is starting up a GoFundMe page. Hopefully not, because hopefully in this particular era, people have learned from the past. Okay, so there's always lessons to be learned and mistakes will be done in this era. And in future, whatever other golden era there's going to be, lessons will be learned from this era and previous, but it is what it is. Anyway, I kind of gone off point, but the point was that a lot of people believe that today's heavyweight boxing era could be seen as a golden era in years to come, as long as many of the current top fighters actually fight each other. And of course, that would include some of the fighters that are currently prospects. So in the next year or two, are they going to start fighting each other? Are we going to see Dan Dubois versus Dillian Whyte, or a Anthony Joshua or Tyson Fury? Of course, Joyce in that as well. Of course, he is getting on a little bit himself. But hopefully, with all the prospects and that coming through, we'll get to see many of them start to overtake, and we'll see that as a golden era, or maybe even as a continuation, especially if it's within the next 4 or 5 years, because usually a golden era is usually around a 10-year period. Already we've had 5 years since 2015, when today's landscape of heavyweight boxing really changed. Wilder becoming WBC champion, Tyson Fury dethroning Vladimir Klitschko. Anthony Joshua, of course, defeated Dillian Whyte to announce himself onto the world stage, and then soon after became world champion in his very next fight. So at that point is where it is. So in the next 4 or 5 years, we'll find out exactly what this era is really all about. Drop your thoughts below, click thumbs up, subscribe, catch you all in the next video.